If you grew up in the 90s, you held this machine's controller. You just do not remember its name. In January 1992, it owned 65% of the console market. It had beaten Nintendo, the first company to do that in a decade. Then it spent 6 years aiming every weapon it built at itself. This is how the winner killed the winner. Start with the part that sounds impossible now. At the end of the 1980s, Nintendo did not have competitors. It had tenants. Nintendo held around 90% of home video games in America, and it ran that empire like a landlord. Developers signed exclusivity deals. Store shelves bent to its rules. If you made games, you made them Nintendo's way, or you did not make them at all. Then, a company that mostly built arcade machines and Las Vegas slot cabinets decided to walk into that house and kick the door. That origin matters more than people think. This was not a toy maker. It had started decades earlier, importing coin-operated machines for American Army bases, then building arcade cabinets, hard-loud machines that had to grab a stranger's attention in 5 seconds or lose the coin. The whole company was wired to fight for attention. So when it built a home console, it did not build it politely. Its console launched in America in 1989. 16 bits of processing power against Nintendo's aging 8. Sharper color. Faster motion. The marketing did not whisper. You heard the phrase before you saw the machine. It named the Speed Blast processing and ran television ads built around a single sentence that a whole generation still repeats. This machine does what the other one won't. It named the enemy on purpose. No one did that. For 2 years it did not work. The machine sold fine and went nowhere near the throne. Kids had a Nintendo. Kids wanted Mario. A faster gray box did not change that. What changed it was a hedgehog. In the summer of 1991, a small internal team led by a young programmer gave the company a mascot built to insult Mario directly. Where Mario was careful, this one was fast. Blue, impatient, tapping his foot when you stopped moving too long. The company did something reckless with him. It put the entire game in the box for free, bundled with the console, and cut the price at the same time. That holiday season, the 16-bit machine outsold Nintendo in America nearly 2-1. By January 1992, it held 65% of the 16-bit market. Sit with the size of that. For the first time since 1983, Nintendo was not the leader in the American market. A company born from arcade coin machines had taken the crown. Here is the part I find almost funny in hindsight. The company was so far ahead that Nintendo started shading its own numbers to look closer. Nintendo publicly forecast 6 million consoles sold by the end of 1992. Its actual installed base that year was barely over 4 million. When your rival is inflating reality to seem competitive, you have already won. The company leaned all the way into being the rebel. When a brutal fighting game came to home consoles in 1993, soaked in blood, Nintendo censored it, sweated the violence out, turned the red to gray sweat. This company left the blood in and hid a code to unlock it. Parents were horrified. Teenagers were sold. The bloody version on this machine outsold the clean one on Nintendo by a wide margin. That was the whole brand in one moment. Nintendo was the console your parents approved of. This was the one you actually wanted. That console would go on to sell more than 30 million units worldwide, close to 20 million of them in the United States. This was not a fluke. This was a machine in a fifth of American homes with a game console. So the company had it. The mascot, the market, the momentum. Everything a business spends a decade chasing. And it could not stop touching it. Within 9 years, it would hand every bit of that away. Not to Nintendo, not to Sony, to its own worst instinct. Hold on to that as this goes, because nobody took this crown from the company. The company set it down itself, one decision at a time. Because here is what nobody tells you about this collapse. It was not one bad product. It was a habit, and the habit had a logic inside the building that sounded almost smart. Keep the loyal customer buying the same machine over and over in pieces. Watch how it starts. While the 16-bit console was still winning, the company sold its most devoted fans an add-on, a compact disc unit that bolted underneath the machine. It reached American stores on the 15th of October, 1992 at $299, which was about what the console underneath it had cost. The promise was full-motion video, real recorded music, the future on a disc. The reality was a thin library of grainy, slow games almost no one remembers now. Its signature titles were interactive movies where you watched fuzzy video clips and pressed a button now and then to nudge the scene. Across a little over 3 years on the market, it sold about 2.2 million units worldwide. Set that against a console base heading past 30 million, and you get the real figure. Fewer than one owner in 10 ever bought the thing. It should have been a warning. It was treated as a rehearsal. Around the same stretch, the company even tried piping games to your house down the television cable, a subscription service years ahead of its time that quietly died. The instinct was always the same. More boxes, more attachments, more reasons for the same customer to pay again. Then in 1994, it did the worst version of the habit. It released a second add-on, a stubby cartridge that plugged into the top of the console to bolt on 32-bit power. Now do the arithmetic a parent had to do standing at the register. The console, the disc unit underneath, the cartridge on top. You saw none of this from the couch. 3 purchases, 3 price tags, 1 machine held together like a tower of compromises. The top cartridge landed in stores on the 21st of November, 1994 at $160. The company had built 800,000 of them. 665,000 went out the door by the end of that year, and then the line stopped moving. The leftovers were pushed out at clearance until the whole product was killed in 1996, less than 2 years old, by the same people who had told your parents it was the bridge to the future. And it gets stranger, because the leadership knew what was coming. At the exact moment it was asking families to buy this bridge to 32-bit gaming, the same company was finishing an entirely new console that would make that bridge worthless. It was selling people an upgrade with one hand and building the thing to obsolete it with the other. The people running it approved both, on purpose. That is the pattern that killed this company. You were on the other side of this, not competition. Self-sabotage sold to the public as innovation. And it was about to make the single most self-destructive decision in the history of game consoles. When I reach it, watch closely, because the company does not lose to an enemy. It ambushes its own side. The new console was supposed to be the real comeback. 32 bits, built for the disc era, the machine that would carry the crown into the next generation. On paper, to you and to everyone else reading the specs, it was strong. The company had a launch date planned for the fall of 1995. Retailers were told to expect it then. Developers built their release calendars around that date. Everyone lined up behind it. Then, on the 11th of May, 1995, at the first ever Electronic Entertainment Expo in the Los Angeles Convention Center, the head of the American branch walked on stage and changed the plan live, in front of the entire industry. The console, he announced, was not coming in the fall. It was in stores that morning. A few chosen retailers already had it on shelves for $399. He thought he was pulling off a brilliant surprise. What he actually did was set off 3 explosions at once. First, the stores. 30,000 machines had been shipped quietly to 4 chains. Toys R Us, Babbage's, Electronics Boutique, Software, etc. If you worked to counter that spring, you learned the same way everybody else in American retail did that they had been skipped while standing in the same building, hearing it from a stage, alongside the press. One of the biggest toy chains in the country took it so personally that it never stocked the console at all. Not that year. Ever. The company had picked a fight with the shelves it needed to survive. Second, the developers. A console lives or dies on its games, and almost none were ready, because everyone had planned for fall. None of it was visible to you. The machine arrived with 6 titles. 6, a racing game, and a fighting game pulled straight from its arcades, and 4 more. That was the entire launch library for the company's whole future, sitting on shelves while confused customers looked for something to play. Third, and this is the kill shot buried inside the kill shot. Sitting at that same show was Sony, a newcomer with no history in home consoles at all. Picture the room you would have sat in then. Sony's team walked on stage after the surprise. One executive came to the microphone, gave the room the price, and left. $299, $100 cheaper than the machine that had just ambushed the market. The room understood instantly. The surprise launch had not blindsided Sony. It had built Sony the perfect entrance. The machine that was supposed to save the company sold 1.8 million units in America across its entire life. Around 9 million worldwide. Sony's console, launched calm and cheap and ready, went on to sell past 100 million. The comeback console did not just fail. It took the momentum the Hedgehog had built over 4 years and set it on fire in a single afternoon. And the hardest part to accept is that this decision was not madness. Inside the company, to someone, it made sense. To understand why, you have to see the war that was going on behind the curtain. Because the American branch that had built the empire and the Japanese headquarters that owned it had stopped behaving like one company at all. Go back to the winning years for a moment, because they hide the fracture. Almost everything that won America was American. The aggressive ads, the price cuts, the Hedgehog bundle, naming Nintendo out loud. The head of the American branch had been handed something rare, real freedom to run his own market his own way, and he had used it to beat the most powerful name in gaming, the one already sitting under your television. But the company was Japanese, and the headquarters sat in Tokyo. And Tokyo was watching a foreign office collect all the credit. The chief in Japan had a habit that former staff described years later. Every Monday, a closed-door meeting, and inside it he would use the American branch's success as a whip, holding up the foreigners' sales numbers to shame his own Japanese teams into working harder. The win was not shared pride. It was a weapon aimed sideways, inside the same building, week after week. You could see the split inside the machine itself. The new console had been engineered in Tokyo, built to run the flat 2-dimensional arcade fighters that were enormous in Japan. In Japan it worked. It sold nearly 6 million units there. But America did not want Japanese arcade ports. America wanted the big 3-dimensional world Sony was selling, and the console Tokyo built was clumsy at exactly that. Headquarters had designed a machine for its own home market and shipped it to a foreign one that wanted something else entirely. The branch that actually understood America had not been allowed to say so out loud. And the machine fought the people trying to write games for it. That is why your shelf stayed thin then. Inside that case sat 8 processors running at once. 2 main chips carrying the load, a crowd of specialized ones around them, and the 2 main chips could not reach memory at the same instant without colliding. Getting real speed out of it meant a programmer had to split the work between those chips by hand, game by game, with tools that barely existed. Studios used to writing for a single processor looked at that and walked away. Sony's machine did the hard part for the developer. This one handed over a wiring diagram and wished you luck. A console that punishes the people who supply its games has already chosen how it ends. So when the biggest calls came, the ones that decided the company's future, Tokyo took the steering wheel back. The American president wanted to keep selling the 16-bit machine that was still printing money. He said out loud that the old console had years of life left in it, and he was right. It kept selling strong into 1996. Tokyo overruled him and killed it early to force everyone onto the new console, The American branch begged against the surprise launch. Tokyo pushed it through anyway. The people who had actually beaten Nintendo were being told to sit down by the people who had only watched them do it. None of that reached you then. The president who built the American empire stepped down in the summer of 1996. He said later, in plain words, that the loss of control is what did it. He had gone from making his own decisions to being handed decisions he did not believe in and told to smile. The best operator the company ever had walked out the door, and the war inside the walls kept going without him. This is the thing I keep circling back to. Most companies in these stories get killed from the outside. A rival is faster, or cheaper, or smarter, and the weaker one loses. If you bought games then, you felt this first. This company had already won that fight. It had already beaten the giant. What actually beat it was that its two halves could not stand to share the victory. The weapon was pointed inward the entire time, and nobody in charge would turn it around. And there is a coda to the surprise launch that almost nobody tells, which is somehow worse than the launch itself. 2 years after the ambush, at the same trade show in 1997, the executive now running the American branch was asked about the console. He told a games magazine that it was not the company's future, not a leak, not an internal memo that got out. You never heard this part. The president of the American business said on the record that the machine sitting on shelves in every store in the country, the machine families were buying that weekend, was already finished. Stores stopped ordering. Developers with half-built games went looking for another platform to put them on. And every person who had paid $399 found out from a magazine that they had bought a dead end. The industry already had a name for this wound. It is named after Osborne, a computer maker that killed its own sales in 1983 by announcing a better machine before the current one had sold through. Announce your successor too loudly, and your own customers stop buying today, and you starve before the successor arrives. The company did it out loud, at its own trade show, to a console with years of contracted software still coming. There was one miracle left in it, and it was the finest machine the company ever built. By the late 90s, it was bleeding badly. The surprise launch had cost it the stores, the developers, and the whole market it had bled to win. Sony owned the living room now. Most people had already written the obituary and moved on. So the company built one more console. And against everything working against it, the thing was brilliant. It launched in America on the 9th of September, 1999, a date the marketing turned into a chant. $99.99. The price was $199. It had online play built into it before anyone else even tried. The modem was in the box, not an accessory you hunted down later, and there was a browser disk, so the machine did email and web pages on a television set at a time when a household with one computer fought over it. In Europe, the online service went live in October of 1999 and cost nothing to use. In North America, the full service followed in September of 2000. Players raced and fought strangers over the internet from their living rooms years before that was normal, on a console their parents had bought as a toy. One of its flagship games had cost a reported fortune to build, an open world so detailed you could open the drawers in a stranger's house and watch the day turn to night. Nothing else on the market looked like it. For once the company had learned its own lesson. Ready at launch. Cheap, stacked with software. And the public came back to it. On its first day in America, it sold more than 225,000 units and pulled in almost $99 million in a single 24-hour stretch. At the time, it was called the biggest single day in the history of entertainment retail. The comeback was not a rumor. You could hold it in your hands. It did not matter. By then, you had stopped waiting. The years of self-inflicted damage had already drained the bank. The company had spent its trust, its retailers, and its cash on the wars of the previous decade, and one brilliant console could not refill all of that fast enough. Sony's next machine was coming, loaded with hype and a built-in movie disc player. And the wounded company did not have the money left to fight another long war. It tried to buy time on price. It cut the console to $150, then to $99, selling each machine at a loss, hoping volume would save it. One may still be in your house. It sold just over 9 million of these last machines worldwide. It was not enough, and it was already too late. On the 31st of January 2001, the company announced it was done. Not just this console. All consoles. The company that had beaten Nintendo, that had put a blue hedgehog in millions of homes, that had run the single best 24 hours in retail barely 18 months earlier, was walking out of the hardware business forever. From now on, it would make games for other companies' machines, including, before long, machines made by Nintendo. You would meet him again soon. Within a few years, the blue hedgehog that had been built to destroy Mario was starring in games on Nintendo's own consoles and eventually racing wheel to wheel with Mario himself. The two mascots that had gone to war ended up on the same team. The kids who had picked sides had grown up, and the fight they once bled over did not exist anymore. And there is one detail here I genuinely cannot shake. The man who was chairman through those final years, an aging investor who had bankrolled the whole thing, had personally loaned the company around $500 million of his own money so that you would still have somewhere to go, just to keep it breathing. He was dying as the console business shut down. On his deathbed, in the spring of 2001, he forgave that debt and signed over personal assets worth close to $700 million to the company he loved. He paid, out of his own estate, for the right of the thing to outlive him. Then he died, weeks later. That is what it finally cost to keep this name alive. Not a merger, not a bailout, a dying man's fortune. So the obvious question, and the one you came here for, is it gone? No, and that is the strangest turn in the entire story. It did not go bankrupt. It quit the part of itself it had been worst at, manufacturing and shipping physical machines, and put everything into the part it had always done better than anyone, inventing places people wanted to spend their time. In 2004, it merged with a slot machine maker, quietly closing a circle since coin machines and arcades were exactly where it had started decades before. And then, it did something none of its dead rivals ever managed. It let its old mascot grow up. You were on the other side of this. The hedgehog that once existed only to insult Mario now headlines a film series that has passed $1 billion at the global box office. The company that walked out of hardware in 2001 turned around in 2023 and spent $776 million to buy the studio behind one of the most downloaded mobile games ever made, which is very likely sitting on your phone right now. In the business year that closed in March of 2024, it booked around 468 billion yen in sales, roughly $3 billion, and almost none of it came from anything you could plug into a television. The money comes from the software it once treated as the boring half of the business. The strategy games, the role-playing worlds, the licensing deals, the mascot who will not age. The machine that beat Nintendo is a museum piece. The company that built it is bigger and healthier now than it was on the day it held 65% of the market. Here is the irony I will leave you holding. The consoles it fought 2 civil wars over are all dead. The add-ons, the surprise launch, the machine it obsoleted on purpose, every last piece of hardware it bled itself building, gone. What survived was the blue thing it created almost as a joke, and the games it only truly committed to after it had lost everything else. The company spent the entire 1990s convinced that the machine was the empire. It aimed every weapon it had at protecting the box, and it hit itself every single time. It took losing all of it to learn that the box was never the point. Which leaves one harder question, and I will let you sit with it. If it had let the hardware go on purpose back in 1993, calmly, without the Civil War and the self-sabotage and the dying man's fortune, would it be bigger today than the giant it once beat? It might be. And the fact that we can even ask that is the whole quiet tragedy of it.